When President Jimmy Carter signed the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act in 1980, people were optimistic about the new opportunities it would provide the Wabanaki Nations. The tribes quickly lost that optimism as the legislation was interpreted to give Maine more control over their activity.
In a message about Carter's passing, they say they honor their leaders and President Carter for reaching the agreement, and add, people of otherwise good intent, like President Carter, signed and supported the settlement acts with hope that it would result in less litigation and conflict and a fairer system for the Wabanaki Nations. In keeping with these motivations that prompted the Settlement Act negotiations in the first place, amendments to these laws are long overdue. If we hope to resolve long-standing injustices equitably and compassionately, as President Carter put it, we must work together toward change.
2 years ago, we dove into the act and how it affected tribal sovereignty, what it looks like today, and what it could look like in the future. At the time, the 1980 Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act was seen as a victory and gave the Passamaquoddies and Penobscot Nation access to more federal dollars. But while the act was written in a way that allowed the tribes to go back and make amendments as needed, members of Wabanaki Nations say that process didn't work as they expected. Donna Loring, Darren Ranko, and Maria Gerard, all members of Penobscot Nation, believe part of why the tribes have had such difficulty moving forward stems from not having full control over their finances and decision-making power. They argue the legislative process back in 1980 had been hurried, and because of that, key details fell through the cracks. Details they believe had the unintended and unwanted effect of taking away the tribe's sovereignty.
Unfortunately, we felt so rushed throughout the whole process by looming federal deadlines and the presidential elections, and there was so much going on. There was overt racial hostilities in the state of Maine, and all these people were angry at us because we had fouled up the real estate market, because nobody could really say who owned the land anymore. There was a lot going on.
It's really complicated.
Though he's not featured in this photo, Tim Woodcock, an attorney from Bangor, played a central role in the passing of the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act. Woodcock was handpicked by then Senator Bill Cohen to become staff director of the Senate's Indian Affairs Committee. Attorney Woodcock argues the tribe's sovereignty remains intact, and a court ruling back in 1830 protected that right.
They're still governments. And their governmental authority is not derived from the U.S. Constitution or any state constitution. It's derived from their Aboriginal authority as tribal communities. The real question with sovereignty, to me, is it's not whether the Maine tribes are sovereign or not. They are sovereign. The question is, what are the limitations on their sovereignty? I think that is the crux of some of the contemporary disagreements that have become public policy issues, is where are the limits of the tribe's authority now, and where ought they to be?
The question surrounding sovereignty and the future of the tribes remains unresolved. In fact, some would like to see the act scrapped completely and instead have members of Wabanaki Nation and Maine officials go back to the drawing board.
And I believe that the Maine Settlement Act has locked us again into this paternalistic relationship with the state of Maine, a relationship that we don't want. We haven't wanted for a long time. It didn't serve us well, all the years leading up to the land claims. And so, there's nothing that can convince me that anyone expected that to continue. And it's almost like the land claims kept us in shackles.
We just want to be left alone to progress and be able to choose our economic future, to choose our educational future, to do what we see fit to do with our lands, and our courts, and our law enforcement. Some people fear that if the tribes get sovereignty, it's going to be horrible. They're going to be able to just do anything and trample the next door neighbor's rights. And no, that's not the way that I see the tribes operating. And you know, I think that we would totally be respective, and we are, of other people's lands and how they do things, and you know, because we've had it done to us. Well, it doesn't mean that we're going to turn around and do something like that to them, which they fear.
This past year, despite vetoing one bill that would have expanded the sovereignty of the Wabanaki Nations, the legislature and the governor's office did enact a number of bills supporting tribal rights. Those include boosting tribal jurisdiction in the courts and protecting sources of water.